I remember when I first watched Castlevania, I felt like something very subtle was missing, and after some reflection, I realized that it lacks the maturity I find in a lot of other media. And don't get me wrong, I still very much enjoyed the show, but there's definitely something to be said about death in media. Death, in my opinion, is a very powerful storytelling device to communicate to the viewer concepts like strife, stakes, and solitude. Though death, like a lot of other things, is most impactful in contrast. When contrasted against birth, joy, or belonging, death is made all the more potent. But one thing I don't think death is good at is communicating horror. Horror, as defined by Oxford Languages, is an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. And while death can communicate these emotions to the audience, I think the psychological reactions of characters who are affected by the death or near death in question are much more effective. Thorfinn's sister's concern or fear of what may happen to him was heartbreaking. Gojo's near-death experience making him go manic was intriguing. Geto's shock when the thing that I won't spoil happened was intense, and the vitriol Itadori felt after seeing Sukuna killing so many people highlighted his disgust. When diving deeper into these examples of horror being communicated through psychological reactions of characters, Gojo's example especially proves my point considering how popular it is. If you're in any sort of anime space online, you'll probably have seen like this meme depicting Gojo's episode after, he almost died. And I think why people like it so much is that it displays the concepts of contrast I've been discussing this whole time. If you haven't watched JJK, all you gotta know is that Gojo's the strongest. Think Kakashi, but stronger for my Naruto fans. No character thus far even came close to his combat prowess, and in Season 0, the prologue to the series, the same thing happens. He's the strongest. He's not as strong, but still the definitive strongest. Starting the story in this way helped bring a sense of safety and familiarity to the viewer. This is then contrasted hard by Bro getting absolutely murked by Toji, which is then contrasted again by Bro tweaking, geeking, and freaking all at once. The reason this scene is so popular isn't because Gojo almost dies, it's because the contrast of emotions and characters' reactions to their experience. We see this with Geto as well. When Toji kills someone very important to him and his sense of self-worth, he's stunned. He pauses and he reflects on the fact that a human life was just lost. And then he acts, summoning a dragon to swallow Toji, who proceeds to not even 360 no-scope, bro, but wrestle your arm out of a dragon's mouth. No-scope, bro. That scene went hard. But anyways, in this scene, there are two very different responses to death. One is pause, and the other is indifference. Fear of death, shock from death, and the disgust at one's own inability when faced with death are all explored in ways showing mutilated human bodies can't do. And I think that's the problem with a lot of stories targeted towards adults. You see, when children's shows are aired or made or whatever, they have to follow a set of rules. Basically, don't give little Jimmy nightmares and don't make his parents too uncomfortable. Because of this limitation, writers have to get creative with how they portray certain elements of the story and plot. In short, limitation breeds innovation. The best way to explain this concept is with sports. There are rules that players are forced to follow, so they are forced to innovate. For example, goaltending in basketball. If a ball is descending and about to go through the net, the opposition cannot interfere with it. If they could, some 8-foot mofo would just stand next to their team's net and swap balls the whole game. That's boring to watch and boring to play. Soccer is a good example of limitation breeding innovation as well. The lower body is best suited for power. The upper body is best suited for dexterity. But the inability to use one's arms in soccer forces the dexterity of the upper body to manifest itself into the lower body, which leads to very interesting results as players work around the limitations inherent to their lower body. Limitations are what stop MMA fighters from just kicking each other in the groin and bawling in pain on the ground. Limitations are what stop sprinters from pulling up with a jetpack to the Olympics, and limitations are what keep things interesting. When Aang comes across his teacher's skeleton in the ravaged air temple, that's gut-wrenching. There's no excessive gore, just good writing, and it's that inability to write adult imagery to communicate adult themes that makes a lot of kids shows paradoxically more mature. Aang expresses his grief, Katara and Sokka express their concern. In contrast, those mutilated corpses from that one show are gnarly but lack the nascent potential of emotion. Finn's awkward affections towards multiple characters throughout the series is much more effective than whatever Sumi and Taka did. I don't even want to know, bro. I can't even talk about it, bro. And that's why kids media is so good, because complex topics that deserve intelligent discussion are handled with care, because they have to be. They can't be too graphic with violent or sexual themes, which leads to potent story moments being put in their place. And there are downsides to this, like Aang, for example, doesn't kill people. He's a pacifist or whatever, so he just blows them around with wind and stuff. The issue is that he blows people around and off an airship, and then he blows people around and off a mountain, and the show pretends like, oh, he's never killed anyone, but those people that he blew off the literal airship, okay, they're dead. They're dead. Y'all can pretend they ain't dead all you want. They dead. They dead, my boy. I'm sorry. There's also this whole like not killing genocidal maniacs because he'd be stooping down to your level, even though they're like an existential threat to like the entire human race. There's like, oh, I mean, what's this dude's specialty? What, slipping through small cracks and creating space rips in like space-time? Yeah, let's put him in a prison, bro. He's never gonna escape, bro. Trust. But maturity and wisdom are all about knowing what is necessary and when. Is not killing a character when it makes sense to immature? Yes. Is showing corpses and carnage all over the screen for shock value immature? Yes, and I'd argue it's much less mature than the former. One demonstrates an inability to destroy, let go, and move on, while the other demonstrates an inability to create. And creation is much more difficult than destruction. It's easier to depict death than it is to get an audience to love a character. So honestly, most media that refrains from extreme imagery is 90% there in terms of making a really good story. And the final thing I want to discuss is an absolute baller Western shonen called Invincible Fight Girl. In the show, there's this character called Kesa Blabana, who in her prime was a passionate fighter, falling into the archetype of the strongest. However, at the time the show takes place, she's just a spiteful old woman. Despite her age though, she still radiates the same insurmountable power when she so chooses, and is mostly depicted using her strength only when annoyed. She never acts upon a sense of fear because there's nothing and no one who can make her fear. Except one. When Andy, our main character, is fighting in a match, a man appears to recruit her, a man of indescribable menace. For the first time we see Kesa Blabana shooken. There's a vulnerable fear in her eyes, despite her being able to take out even the toughest opponents simply by looking at them. The character in question had an unnerving relaxation about him. He spoke lax and fearless, and his words seemed to be hiding a double meaning, like a passionless apex predator who knows there's no equal to its power. And that's when I knew I had to make this video, when I saw such intense malice conveyed without a single drop of blood, when I saw cunning and caution clashing against each other as a concussion feeling washed over me, when I saw the power and importance of potency.
We'll be in touch, Aunt P, with both of you.